Okay, so welcome everybody. Tonight is the third special meeting this commission has had about the Office of Planning's proposed zoning changes for the upper Connecticut Avenue commercial core of Chevy Chase. I'm going to start by having the commissioners introduce themselves. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the general rules, meeting rules, and the specific rules for this meeting. And then we'll vote on an agenda and get the conversation going. Let's see, Jim, I see a note here that you are because I sent you the link, you're being identified as me. So actually, maybe I have to change.
I see that, yeah.
Maybe I have to change your
I don't understand that. That's never happened before.
Couldn't find your link, so I sent you mine, and what
I see. Well, where is the link? I can find it. I didn't see it though.
Stay right there. I'm just gonna change your name, okay?
Sure, whatever. It's fine. Anyway, despite what it says underneath me, I am James Nash. I represent single member District 03 and wish everybody good evening.
Okay, Bruce.
I'm Bruce Sherman. I represent single member District 02.
Okay, Peter Lynch.
I'm Peter Lynch. I represent SMD 05. Thank you for being here.
And Zach Ferguson.
Hi, everyone. Zach Ferguson. I represent single member District 07. I'm also the ANC's treasurer. Apologies, it's DCPS spring break and I'm traveling this week, so I might have to jump off a little early, but thanks for being here.
Okay, and I'm Peter Gosselin, and I represent District 6, which is largely the west side of Connecticut. So far, Commissioner Zeldin isn't here, and our chair, Lisa Gore, has said that she will not make this meeting. This will be the third meeting that she hasn't made, so I'm going to chair the meeting. Let me talk very briefly about the general rules, which are that we're going to be civil, and that people, residents who are online, need to stay muted unless and until they're called on to speak. People are limited to 3 minutes. Commissioners and residents are limited to 3 minutes of remarks, and Commissioner Nash will be the timekeeper here. We had some success last week, but who knows this week. I want to talk for a moment about the specifics for this meeting. This commission has taken a lot of public testimony. I know many of you feel that you have not been heard over a very long period of time by the district, by us, but the fact is that we have taken a good deal of public testimony on this subject. What we haven't done, or haven't done enough of, is talk among ourselves about whether we can agree enough to come up with a useful resolution on this subject. And so I'm going to try, and I hope my fellow commissioners will help me, keep the meeting focused on the conversation between the commissioners. If we have time towards the end to take public comments, then we'll do that, but it will be very limited because I don't know enough to where my fellow commissioners are to figure out what to draft as even a starting point, a real starting point. I've actually drafted something, but I mean, which I'll tell you about in a second, but we need to talk among ourselves. So let me say one other thing, which is that I have drafted a number of documents which I have sent to the commissioners. A document that I intended as a discussion draft, just a sort of pure kind of my premises coming into this issue. And, here's where I think we ought to head. I drafted a kind of scoreboard of issues that I hope that the commissioners talk about tonight. And I've drafted a very bare bones version of a resolution that only reflects my views as I've heard the community and as I've heard fellow commissioners, not a finished product at all. To make sure that nobody thinks that we're hiding anything, I will make sure after this meeting, all of this material is put somewhere where you can get it. One of our problems in the last several weeks, months, is that because our chair is running for council, things are not getting done. Things are not getting up on our website, and it's a problem. The other thing that I should alert all of you to is that we are vividly aware that this issue is like almost every issue this commission takes up, is a hot one. And we're not going to try to jam something. We're not going to take any votes tonight. We're going to try to see if we can come towards some understanding among ourselves. And one of us, and it may be me, it may be somebody else, will draft something coming out of that. And we will try to get that up and post yet another meeting. Our deadline here is April 29th, when the Zoning Commission takes up the Office of Planning's proposal. So that's where we are in terms of the general meeting rules, and that's where I hope we are, or at least the commissioners are, with regard to this specific meeting. And again, I want to reassure you, no votes will be taken tonight. We are just trying to work ourselves towards some consensus on where we want to go with this resolution. So let's turn to the agenda. And does either Bruce or Peter, does somebody want to amend this to add a discussion of some of the issues that have come up today, not regarding zoning, but basically our internal process such as it is?
Yeah, well, I could move that we amend the agenda to include discussion of an alternative means of posting items to the web.
Do you want to do an executive session to talk about some of the more thorny issues involving internal process?
That might be necessary.
Okay, well then, why don't how about if I can make a friendly amendment to your proposal, that you propose that we take the last half an hour, say from 8:30 to 9, if we get there, or whatever the last half an hour of this meeting is, to have the option of going into an executive session to talk about meeting procedure and our how we conduct our business.
Yeah, so I accept that friendly amendment and move that we reserve as needed in the last half hour of this meeting to go into executive session to discuss how we handle our website and related matters.
Does Bruce have a second?
I second.
All in favor of, any discussion? All in favor, yeah, fine. Okay, so that's we've amended the agenda, and I understand that to be accepting the agenda. So let's turn to the discussion. I mean, I'm happy to start where any commissioner wants to start. I proposed that a kind of scoreboard, and to get us to at least put some order to this discussion. And I said I thought a threshold issue for how we're going to handle this is, does the commission think that the whole process behind OP's zoning proposal is so defective that it could be successfully challenged, at minimum to force a redo, or perhaps result in a stalemate and no zoning change? So I mean, in the course of our discussions, particularly last week, we heard about Chevy Chase Voice and its lawyer, Mr. Hanlon, filing a notice of intent to sue the zoning commission over process. Commissioner Sherman spoke then and has spoken with us since, and has posted something on the listserv saying that he thinks that there are serious issues, process issues here. And it seems to me that before we get to substance, we need to decide whether we're just going to focus on process, or we're going to focus on substance, or we're going to the guts of the OP proposal, or we're going to focus on both. So, I mean, my suggestion is we start with the process question. Others? Yeah, Peter?
Yeah, I think one thing that would get some clarity in my mind is after the April, what was it, 29th set down, what other dates after that are pertinent to us?
I'm not sure I can answer that question, but April 29th wasn't a set down. The set down was November 9th. April 29th,
For the approval.
they're going to have a hearing on this, but I
Yes.
think there's a high likelihood. I don't know this. I think we should operate as if they could vote on it April 29th.
Right.
So, and that's a substantive up or down vote. So that I think that I don't know if there are other dates beyond April 29th.
So after April 29th, if they voted to approve it, the zoning would be done. Is that right? Is that how we understand it?
Unless one of these, unless this intent to sue by Chevy Chase voice pause the thing. And I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the law there. And look, Peter, I don't know for sure that they'll go, straight from listening to us to a vote. Somebody is pointing out that Ellen McCarthy is on the line and might know. Ellen, can you give us are you on the line, and could you give us just a very quick answer? Ellen is a resident, a constituent of mine, and was the director of the Office of Planning for a while, so knows this issue, these areas. Ellen, are you there?
I am there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
If the commission votes on the 29th to approve the zoning, then it would be advertised, or then be sent to the National Capital Planning Commission for them to weigh in as to whether there's any federal interest. That seems unlikely. So it would be advertised in the DC Register for 30 days, and then the commission would take final action. If comments or concerns come in during that 30 days that they feel raised issues that they hadn't considered originally, or something that means that they need to reconsider, then they could do that. So they can either then discuss more and decide whether to ask for additional information, or they could vote the final vote, and then once it's advertised in the DC Register, it will become final.
And Ellen, just so I understand, just to clarify that, so that whatever is taken up in that potential additional 30 days is limited. In other words, the ANC saying, well, we still have problems, it doesn't count in that 30 days. It's limited to sort of new issues, and whether the Regional Planning Commission thinks there are federal issues.
Generally, yes, because they will have, before they take the action, if they vote on the 29th, they will have considered whatever the ANC and the witnesses have asked them to consider, and they will have made a decision on the process issues before they even have the hearing. What they can do at the end of the 29th is, if issues have been raised that they feel they need more information about, they can ask for the Office of Planning or the ANC or Chevy Chase Voice or whomever to submit additional information and not take a vote, and then consider that information and vote on it, or discuss it and vote on it at a later session.
Typically, does the zoning commission vote to act on essentially the day they get the day they take up they do a hearing on a proposed zoning?
If this were a simpler set of issues, there'd be a good chance that they would vote on it. My guess, if I were a betting person, is that they will not make a decision. They probably will not even get through all of the testimony. Although I haven't looked to see how many people have signed up, but they will want to be sure that everybody that signed up or that shows that weighs in that day has their 3 minutes if they're an individual or 5 minutes if they're an association.
Peter, do you have any questions? Peter?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking, yeah. Ellen, thanks for being here. When the Office of Planning has put together zoning packages like this, how often has it been, I mean, is it likely to move forward?
It just depends on how serious the objections or issues are that are raised at the hearing. It's, you know, it's a pretty complex set of recommendations since it has to do with height and density and bulk and a lot of design considerations to keep the storefronts along Connecticut Avenue still small and, you know, contributing to the street vitality, stepping down in the back. It's a fairly complex set of recommendations, or the zoning has a lot of moving parts. So I wouldn't, that's why I think they probably will not be in a position to vote. And you know, they have to give the ANC great weight, which means they don't necessarily have to agree with what the ANC's position is, but if they don't, they have to indicate explicitly on the record why they thought that the ANC's comments were not germane.
One final question from me. If any other commissioners want to ask questions, go ahead. But I mean, my sense is that we ought to try to act by the 29th. We can reserve judgment on some things. In the rough initial draft that I passed around, I said, you know, FAR and side lot requirements and so on. We can, and questions about the parking requirements, to the extent that they are in this document or in by reference to other district regulation or law, we can reserve judgment on that. But my own view on this is that if we can't say something by the 29th, we're really hobbling ourselves.
Well, if you submit a resolution for consideration on the 29th, that doesn't, and they don't make a final decision that day, then it doesn't preclude you from sending in further comments or testimony based on what you've heard at the hearing that day.
What about the flip of that, which is if we don't send in one and wait for this 30-day period and like listen to people more and look at what people say to the zoning commission, do we hobble ourselves in some sense?
Yes. Yeah, I would definitely not count on getting a chance to weigh in on 30 days. That's the 30 days would be just if there were a comment that you had specifically on how the text was written and how the final text was advertised. But if you can't just raise issues that you should have raised at the hearing.
Okay. Do other commissioners have questions of Ellen before we let her go, or let her go back into the audience?
I've got one more question, and thank you for this again. Would there be an opportunity to vote on portions of the zoning proposal? For instance, just on the Connecticut Avenue portion, absent the Civic Core portion, or just on the Civic Core and not the Connecticut Avenue, or would they take it all in one fell swoop?
Unless there's a specific reason for them to divide it up, they would generally consider the text as the whole text, and not consider just pieces of it. If there were issues that were raised about just one portion, like the Civic Core part, then they could ask for additional comments on that and not make a decision on the whole text. But they wouldn't just say, okay, let's vote on the part that is everything but the Civic Center, and then we'll vote on the Civic Center later. No.
And then just for clarity, after this potentially would clear that 30-day period, that's essentially final?
Yes, once
Okay.
it's advertised in the DC Register.
Got it. Thank you very much.
And, let's let Ellen go and just talk. Bruce, this is an issue that you've focused on pretty intently. Do you want to speak to the issue of essentially which of several directions we should go?
Well, whatever the substance of our resolution, whatever resolution we might submit to the zoning commission, I believe we should go to them now in the form of a letter asking that this case be designated as contested so that the ANC has party status. Party status would enable the ANC to have a much more fulsome representation before the zoning commission, as I understand it, to be able to discuss relevant documents and issues and concerns that we have. It is a case that has such significance for our community that for us to have the ANC representing 15,000 residents of Chevy Chase to have 3 minutes in addition to whatever we submit. And if we submit something, say a resolution, then we would, at least in our 3 minutes, make passing reference to the resolution, which would probably consume the entire 3 minutes. In other words, we are relegated to a very small role in this hearing, other than the great weight that the zoning commission has to give to any resolution that we provide. But in terms of explaining our position, identifying the issues, elaborating for the benefit of the commission, the concerns in the community, we represent obviously a very diverse set of views here. And it's incumbent upon the process, the zoning commission's process, to give an ANC the opportunity to represent its constituents. We're the neighborhood voice. So I've made that case to you commissioners this morning. I made it in a listserv post. I believe, again, regardless of whatever we say, I think it is very important for us to have party status. I'll just go back and say that when I asked, and Commissioner Lynch, Commissioner Zeldin co-signed a letter that I sent to the zoning commission on November 8th, the day before the set-down hearing. At that time, I was merely petitioning for them to hold off until we had our survey results available. I did not know at the time. I'm a relatively new commissioner, new to the process. I had no idea that that was our opportunity to ask that it be a contested case, as opposed to what it was determined to be, a rulemaking case. And therefore, we missed the opportunity, since we did not have due notification and we had no participation in the November 9th set-down hearing. We missed the opportunity to make the case for a contested designation. And so therefore, the process was flawed. Now, they acknowledge, Chair Anthony Hood of the Zoning Commission acknowledged that they'd made a mistake, but they waived the notification requirement. I've asked the Office of the Advisory Neighborhood Commission legal counsel if, in fact, that's what an agency's right is, a commission's right is, to simply waive a requirement they have. And the answer has come back that yes, they can do that. So I think there's a procedural equity issue here, a lack of appropriate procedure offering us an opportunity to participate as the zoning commission's own procedures provide. And therefore, I think we go back to them and we say, we'd like to have it be a contested case so we can have party status and fully represent the interests and concerns of our community. That's my view, and I think we should send them a letter immediately. That's what I propose.
And so could I just pursue that with you? Just a question. So if the OANC lawyer who answered your query about this is right, and as a legal matter, they have the right to waive their own rules, procedural rules, and they answer, therefore, no to us. No, they're not going to change the status of this. What's your position about what we should do then?
Well, I think we take that as it comes. Now, understand that when all the commissioners were copied on the correspondence with the OANC, I asked them two questions. One was, do they have the right to go ahead and do this? And the answer came back, yes. And then two, the second question is, well, could we challenge their right to do that and have the designation be changed to a contested case? And they didn't give me an answer to that. They weren't sure. So I think what we do is we simply write to the zoning commission, lay out the case, and simply ask that the designation be changed. We don't know what the answer will be. If it comes back, no, we're not going to change it. Well, then, of course, we just take our cues from that and we move forward with whatever resolution we choose to draft.
Do other commissioners have questions of Commissioner Sherman?
Yeah, maybe Bruce, for the benefit of people listening and for myself included, could you briefly go over the difference between this contested and what was the other term? I'm sorry.
Rulemaking.
Rulemaking, yeah.
Right. Well, I'm certainly no expert on this, and others on the call can provide additional on the meeting now can provide additional information. But essentially, if we have party status, if it's a contested case, we're able to speak at length to the issues at hand. We're able to provide documentation to describe the process that we have gone through with the community to assess the city's proposed redevelopment, not only of the community center library site, but of course, Upper Connecticut Avenue from Livingston Street to the Circle, to go in depth and detail in terms of community sentiment, what we're hearing, in full representation of our constituents' interests. In a rulemaking case, again, as I understand it, yes, we can provide a resolution, and again, they have to give that great weight. But as Joel Lawson mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we would have 3 minutes, as would any other person testifying at the hearing. And it just seems to me that our ANC, again, representing 15,000 residents, to have simply 3 minutes is woefully inadequate.
Thanks for that. And in answer to your question, Peter G., I would agree with that.
Zach?
Yeah, a question about being able to speak at length. I think that I believe groups are given 5 minutes. We heard last meeting, there's 3 minutes for individuals, 5 minutes for organizations, if I recall correctly. But is there a word limit on, if we pass resolution, we want to attach documents, we want to submit written testimony, we want to go, 100 pages of documentary evidence about our ANC's opinion. Is there a word limit or page limit to what our resolution would be able to be submitted?
I don't know, but I doubt it. We've submitted some pretty hefty resolutions to other district agencies, and there was no limit. Maybe we could crash their submission site, but I don't think there's any limit. Jim, Nash.
Yeah. So what it boils down to is, in either case, we can submit a resolution. In either case, they must read the resolution and give it great weight. So the only difference is, do we have more time to talk before this commission and tell them whatever it is we want to tell them, in addition to the resolution we already sent, is what it sounds like to me. And, that does not seem like such a big deal to me either way. That said, it's very annoying to me that the zoning commission breaks their own rules and then says that doesn't matter, that they can just do that. Are both of those things that I just said, are they both correct, or am I missing something here?
Jim, let me add that, as we heard at the last special meeting on this topic, when the difference between rulemaking and contested cases came up, we also would have the ability, not that we're going to figuratively put some on the witness stand and cross-examine them, but we would have the ability to ask questions, to engage in dialogue, to go into depth and detail on the specifics of the proposal, the city's proposed Office of Planning proposed amendments. If we decided also, Jim, that we wish to put a different idea forward to the zoning commission, for example, and this gets into specifics, but I will mention it, I'll reference it because one of my constituents, Brian Heilman, at the last meeting, raised the possibility of proposing to the zoning commission that the two zones under consideration, well, there are three, but the two principal zones, be separated and discussed separately. In other words, that we take the Civic Core zone on its merits, and we take the rest of Connecticut Avenue from Livingston to the Circle on its merits. And if we were to go in and propose that, that's not something we can get through in 3 or 5 minutes. We would have to be able to lay out the case, and then the zoning commission itself would have questions of us, presumably. There would be a conversation and a dialogue. I'm only arguing that we give ourselves the opportunity to have the participation that I think we merit regardless. It's really a pretty straightforward process piece here that I'm advocating. I would also mention that Michael Zeldin, Commissioner Zeldin, called me today. We discussed this, and you saw his note on email, but he asked me to mention tonight on his behalf that he supports this idea as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That clarifies it for me.
Let me just say that I understand the impulse for this, but one of the things that I think Ron Eichner, who responded to Bruce, your post on the Chevy Chase listserv, got right, is that this community has been talking about this change for a long time. And that through a process that I acknowledge was faulty, but nonetheless has had this conversation for a very long time. And I guess the real question is the need to cross-examine. Do we really think there's a lot of substance to be gotten out of that, or is the main aim here just to extend the process in hopes that we get some willingness, some increased willingness to bargain with us? That delay buys us something. Bruce.
Well, again, Peter, I'm advocating a level of participation that I think is appropriate for an ANC in representing the diversity of views we have in our commission area. It's not to prolong the process. It is to be able to engage in the process fully and fairly, as I believe we should be able to do. Again, I see this as being fairly straightforward. We would then get into the merits of whatever we wanted to say in the balance of this evening and next week in the run-up to the hearing. But that's simply, for my purposes in representing my constituents, I don't want to tell them that we had 5 minutes before the zoning commission on something as monumental as this, no matter how much this has been discussed in the past. And I would say in response to that, that there's significant new information since 6 months ago. Our survey, other meetings that we have held on this topic, additional community input. So I think there's new information that our community has provided us with. That's not just something that goes back, 2 or 3 years.
I'm getting notes from people saying they can't hear me. I've just turned up the volume on my computer. Does this improve things? Would somebody just answer that in the text there? Chris Otten is saying it. Both to Chris and to Elizabeth, I said at the outset, if you didn't hear it, that this meeting is primarily focused on, needs to be focused on commissioners talking to each other about where we are on this issue, both procedurally and substantively. And so we're going to postpone, unless you have a technical contribution here. I think that we're better off letting the commissioners talk. And to that point, Commissioner Nash.
Yeah, I want to say that another thing occurred to me about what. Hello, is someone else's talk? Another advantage perhaps of Commissioner Sherman's idea here. I have a hunch we are not going to agree as a commission on this zoning proposal. And if we have a diversity of views, if this is a contested case, we could go before the commission and explain, if we dissented, why we dissented. Am I right about that? And that to me would be a good thing if we're on the other side of the majority vote. Am I right that we could do that?
Jim, if I can jump in real quick, Jim, I would agree with you. I think anytime we as a commission have pushed for more input, have pushed for a little bit more time to allow the community to weigh in, to allow us to decide and debate, I think that's made this the whole entire project more rich, and the people that are weighing in on it and deciding on it more informed. So I'm with Bruce on that, and I agree with your last point. I think even if we come at this with all sorts of different views, that will only make the final result better. So I'm in favor of that.
I have to, let me just weigh in here. I think we're going to lose Commissioner Ferguson. So first, on a very practical note, I don't think that we can vote on even a letter tonight. We have a really wobbly quorum here, and I just don't think that, I think it's going to have to be part of whatever we do at a meeting next week. And on the substance issue, to Jim and to Peter, yes, we can all go in and we can each have our moment of fame and give all the color we want to give, but we lose something in doing that. We lose the usefulness of having a commission. That if we can't agree among ourselves, then why can we expect the community to agree? And I just think that it is the easy out to say, oh, we'll each have our own view and we'll each go to the zoning commission and express it. Why are we members of this commission? Mary and Elizabeth, I can again say that we're trying to have this discussion among commissioners. We'll try to find some time later in the meeting where other people can speak, where residents can speak.
Peter, they might have, I don't know, as Ellen McCarthy did, they might have information that would be relevant to what we're considering. I respect your direction that this be among commissioners, but there might be something that
Bruce,
I simply don't know what they're going to say.
I think it is not wise for us to do this. We did not get to a draft resolution because we have not talked enough among ourselves. And if we're going to even make an attempt to get there, let's see where we are on both the process and substance. I think you've made a powerful case that we say something about the process. And the only two caveats I would add to this are that I think that whatever case we make on process, you make it separate and distinct from Chevy Chase voice. That it's our own argument about contested versus rulemaking. And the other thing is, I think that we ought to make, and I've been disturbed for more than about 2 years, that as it turns out, last Thursday, the zoning commission approved a set of new procedural rules that substantially reduce the role of ANCs in zoning cases. And the most important tool that they use in making this to reduce the ANC's role is in the notification to the ANC. And I actually, in the draft, a rough and ready draft I sent around, it almost seems as if they implemented the procedures they voted on last Thursday in notifying us before those procedures had been approved by the zoning commission. And so I think that makes us an interesting test case about challenging that decision by the zoning commission. Again, I am not a lawyer and I don't know whether we can challenge those new rules, but I think that we ought to couple those two things together.
Peter, there's information that someone just texted me that the 1617 U Street zoning commission case was just switched to a contested case from a rulemaking case today. So there is precedent, obviously. I'm sure there's precedent before this for this to happen. I don't know the particulars of this. Others may very well know, and maybe some who've had their hands up would wish to speak to this if they know something about it. But I think it's relevant to mention it.
My suggestion is that we go on and talk about substance. I'm sorry, Jim.
Yeah, just one other thing. It seems to me from what I know, if we look at this more broadly, what might be driving this move to cut ANCs out is a problem that besets lots of so-called blue states where affordable housing is, there's a shortage of it. And it's the problem of NIMBYism, basically. Nobody wants to put it into their neighborhood. And so cutting out ANCs may be something that has been decided is a good thing to do if you want to build affordable housing. And let's face it, that's partly what's going on here. And that gives me some pause in supporting this letter. But I'm a little bit torn because I also think it's what they, they're violating their own procedures and then giving themselves a pass is not good. And, there's a, democratic process. So at this point, though, I hate contesting things, gets things more legalistic. I like Peter's idea that we should separate ourselves out from Chevy Chase's voice, but I'm leaning towards supporting the letter because that contesting is the only way we're going to have a voice. It seems like in this whole process right now.
Let me just point out that on a rough vote count, whip count, that suggests that there's going to be a majority for this. So, but again, I don't think we can vote on this tonight. And the majority that of 4 right now, and I'm undecided on this issue, includes Commissioner Zeldin, who isn't here, so I don't think we can vote on it tonight.
Peter, let me just interrupt. He did say to me that if I texted him, he would vote on this. I think, Bruce, we're going to talk about a whole lot of stuff with substance too, and I just think it's not wise that we make a decision tonight. If you guys want to overrule me, that's fine. Go ahead. But if
not now, then when would we do it, though?
Right, that's the question, right? We're here tonight. We don't have another meeting scheduled.
Yeah, we're going to have to do that if we're going to try to make a resolution, put together a resolution.
Right, but I would just offer, Peter, that if we're going to go to the zoning commission to ask that this be changed to a contested case, we need to do that in deference to their process as soon as possible.
That's right, we do.
So I think if we're in agreement broadly here, not that you're in agreement or not that Commissioner Ferguson and Commissioner Gore's not with us, but Commissioner Zeldin did say he supported it, and if I texted him, he would come on and vote. So we could proceed with this. And again, it's only to do what we've, in a very limited way, what I've outlined. That's all it is.
Commissioner Lynch and Commissioner Nash, what do you want to do?
Well, I think the last meeting we voted on a very important DCPS budget testimony with only 4. The person who wrote it wasn't here, Zeldin. The chair wasn't here. It's the exact same situation. we're under the gun right now, and we've got another very important situation before us. I think we broadly agree. Apparently Zeldin agrees, and I don't think any harm can come from sending this letter soon and then setting up a meeting where we talk about, as you say, substance. But
I want to talk about substance tonight. So I still think we need to try to get to some agreement about the substance of this. I think it is, honestly, I mean, what's the use of a commission if we're all going to go our separate ways, and that this is the process change we want to all go our separate ways? I mean, so
it seems to me that we're sort of in agreement for the most part on
Here's a
this
suggestion.
letter.
Okay, here's a suggestion.
We've only got 4 people, so to really get into substance talk with a good chunk of the commission not even here.
And Peter, just a note, there are 4 hands up. I realize we want to have a conversation just among commissioners, but I'm a little pained to not let people into the discussion and hear their views on this particular point. They may have valuable additional elements to add. So
let me make a suggestion, Bruce, and to the other commissioners. If we're going to talk about a vote tonight on this narrow issue of process, then I think we ought to let people comment on this narrow issue before we vote. But I want to keep this to something like 10 minutes, or until 8 o'clock. And then, Bruce, if you would text Michael and see if he'll come on, then we'll handle the issue of the writing a letter to the zoning commission asking that this be converted from a rulemaking to a contested case. Does that seem like a reasonable?
Yeah, I like the idea of listening to some people, but setting a time limit. And right now we have 5 hands up, and if we keep it to 2 minutes each, that'll kind of keep us on schedule. What is that? What do you all think about that?
It's Elizabeth McPike. She has the one with the first hand up. Is she still here? No, she doesn't have her hand up. But so I think the person after that was Mary.
No, I am still
Okay.
here, Peter.
Okay. We're Jim, keep time.
All right. Yep.
Real tight.
Thank you. And Peter, I had sent you a or I thought I did in the chat saying that I would never have understood the difference between a regular hearing and a contested hearing had someone not sent me the videos on this 16 U Street, I think it's 1617 U Street project. And I happened to be under the weather when they sent them. And so it was like 10 hours of hearings, and I didn't listen to all of it, but I listened to enough to thoroughly understand that it's a world of difference. And it really wasn't until the last hearing where they questioned a couple experts that they had on, that you could see in the commission's voices and faces that they themselves were turning around right there on the screen. It was quite fascinating to watch. And then, stop me if I'm over my time here.
Jim will.
Yeah, you will, that's right. And then I saw, and I think it's connected, there was this letter from the Attorney General, which I believe was, came out of this hearing and the change. And the first point in the Attorney General's letter really was scolding the zoning commission and saying in effect that what one thing you should have done, and he put it as number 1, and you should do in the future, is to put a big sign up at the property announcing the proposed change. And looking back upon these last couple years and all the people we've run into who hadn't the slightest idea what was going on, I, of course, right away thought what a difference it would have made if there had been big signs up at the community center and the library announcing what was being proposed. Thank you.
Mary Rouse.
Hi, I just want to say that I'm glad that you're letting people speak, Peter. I think that the ANC should never have a meeting where the community is told to sit quietly and listen, especially when there's 4 commissioners talking. I don't know where Zach Ferguson is, if he's left the meeting or not, but this was a meeting that Lisa Gore scheduled, and I'm surprised that she's not here. And I just think that the ANC owes it to this community to treat us with respect and give us a chance to speak. You've shut down the chat and people can't communicate with you. And I urge you to take a vote tonight. This is an important issue for a lot of people who've taken the time to be here and show up. So out of respect to those who have shown up and who are here and have worked on things, I think it's important to take a vote tonight and to support the majority of people in this community who have spoken up and want something done here. And so I hope that, Peter, you will not try to, not take any action tonight, because I think that's not what people want you to do. The majority of people in this community do not want that. If you'd stop and ask them. Thank you.
Elizabeth Baden.
I'd like to speak for the people who don't share that view. I am appalled by the notion that this ANC would take a vote on such an important issue without a majority of its members present. Well, excuse me, without a significant number of its members present. And I would really like to see this vote deferred and cooler minds prevail. I would also like to see some an opportunity to challenge some of the really kind of outlandish misrepresentations that have been made around how this process works, including what it means to be to provide what matter of right means, what it means to have sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
You're upset with this.
I will stop.
Yeah. Look, I do think that you have a point in that. I mean, what zoning is, the rules, and at some point, you don't get to litigate the rules every step of the way. Corinthia Simmons.
Hi, I just want to say I feel like it's very deplorable that you guys are rushing to have this vote. I also think that there are those of us who want development, and I'm just really annoyed that you all are community service members. You're trying to go against something that is to help the community, and I feel like it's being rushed so that we can put off the development that has already been put together by the city. I just feel like it's rushed to just mess up what the city has already decided. And it just seems very shady. It doesn't seem, I won't say ethical, but it feels kind of unethical for you guys to rush and go through this. And then the last thing that really makes me very upset is that you guys want to go along with Chevy Chase Boys when the leader of that group has said very racist things about me, has said horrible things about me. And I don't understand how an ANC can position themselves with someone like that. And it just makes me very upset. I'm very upset. And then lastly, Peter, I just don't like how you have been saying unprofessional things about Lisa not being here. You haven't made these comments about other people not being here. And lastly, you're also the co-chair. So if Lisa hasn't done something, you step up and do it. Don't just say Lisa hasn't done something. It's just, I'm very upset with you guys. And I just don't understand. You guys have been on Earth longer, and I just never thought people would act so unprofessional like this. That's all I have.
Jamie Butler.
Hi, thanks, Peter. I'm upset too, because I think you all are ignoring the long history of redevelopment at the Civic Core. This isn't just about the current commissioners, right? I mean, you know that, Peter. You've referenced them in the past, and to say that they're the way you all are talking right now is if there hasn't been community conversation on this. There are plenty of people that support redevelopment up there, and they're not sitting here screaming at you all to change your minds. And I think the idea of questioning the zoning, yes, the zoning commission or the OP should have come back and given us notice that they were going to set down the amendments, but they did come back. We knew exactly what they were going to put there. None of it was a surprise to us. So now to try to use that as a way of stopping development, which is what this sounds like to me, and to listen to Jim Nash now start to say, well, I think we should send something and try to stop it. That's how it all feels. And I'm really disappointed, really disappointed. Thank you.
Brian Altman.
Chair Gosselin, in Lisa's absence, I just want to, first of all, say to the entire ANC, thank you for your professionalism and thank you for making room for all the voices in the community. I don't think this is about stopping anything, but it is about the importance of process and the importance of everybody being heard with respect to the zoning in particular. And I think that Commissioner Sherman's motion and those of you who support it is appropriate to give an opportunity for all those to be heard. I think it's significant that the 1617 U Street case was moved from rulemaking to contested precisely to give those voices some weight at the zoning commission. So that's my comment.
Two more people, and then we're going to do this very quickly. I want to ask Commissioner Sherman, have you gotten Michael Zeldin?
I've texted Michael to tell him that when we proceed to take a vote, that I will text him again. So I will do that once we so move.
Okay, and is Commissioner Ferguson still on?
No, I think he departed.
Okay, yeah, it's a complicated issue. Chris Baden.
Yeah, thank you. The Chevy Chase Voice request for a contested hearing relied on a very specific provision in the zoning regulations that called for a contested case when a property owner seeks to rezone its own property. It does not apply when the Office of Planning submits a larger zoning request for a neighborhood or for a larger area. And the Zoning Commission and the Office of Zoning are already on record in response to Chevy Chase Voice's complaint to the Office of Open Government as saying they don't agree with Chevy Chase Voice's interpretation that regulation applies here. So I don't see the point of the ANC joining Chevy Chase in a procedural argument that the Zoning Commission already appears to have rejected. It seems to me that that's just a play for delay in the whole process. And as has been pointed out, it's a process that's been going on for a couple of years now. You guys have had the Office of Planning's zoning proposal since October, and now here it is April. So, you know, what gets great weight for the commission is the resolution that you pass and submit in writing. It's not whatever representative of the commission stands up and says during a contested case. So unless there's some regulation that you can point to that says an ANC can request and get a contested case, I think you're just completely barking up the wrong tree. With respect to 1617 U Street, the commission did that as a contested case. They said in an abundance of caution, because that is a district-owned property, like the Civic Core, admittedly, but that proceeding has taken 30 hours of public hearings over 6 different sessions spread out over 4 or 5 months. All it gets you is delay. You can still have your voice heard. You can still get great weight if you just pass a resolution.
2 minutes.
I just, in, to Chris's point, and responding to Elizabeth McPike, I mean, you can't post property. I mean, you can't post property when you're doing you're rezoning whole areas. So I guess you can, but you'd be posting hundreds and hundreds of properties. I did, you know, there's a kind of conflation here of two things that are very different. Elizabeth, and this is going to be the last. We're already over past 8 o'clock. So Elizabeth.
Yeah, I don't really understand the points that Christopher Vaden just made, and Elizabeth Vaden, and Jamie Butler, for that matter. If there is really nothing to lose by asking the zoning commission to turn this into what it should be, which is a contested hearing. And that's not taking sides with Chevy Chase Voice. That's taking sides with what the proper procedure should be. And it would be great if you could just focus on that and not on bad-mouthing other people in the community. That's all I have to say.
Okay. So my suggestion at this point, because I do think I still have hopes that we're going to do a resolution. I still have hope that it has to do with substance, not just process. Bruce, can you get Michael on the line?
Okay, I want to.
Can we hold on just 1 second?
Yeah, I have something I want to say now in response to what I've heard here. And what I've heard here has given me pause. I don't feel comfortable now voting for this, especially in the absence of Commissioners Ferguson and Gore. I would like to hear what they think about this. I am uncomfortable with the bedfellows that I would be joining with on this, and so at this point, I would prefer we delay this until we can hear from the full commission based on the objections of people that I've heard. And I want to say, I mean, to me, I am for development. I do not have a problem with what zoning is doing. On the substance of it, I'm totally on board with it. And to me, I'm separating that out from the procedure. Some of the people here say you can't do that. So now I want some clarification on that before I'm ready to rush to a vote right now.
And Commissioner Lynch.
Yeah, we came into this meeting, I thought we agreed, even if every commissioner was here, that we wouldn't be voting, we'd be talking about how we might vote later on. I'd like to finish. How we might vote later on. Bruce had this idea of doing the letter to possibly give us more voice at the table. And I thought that was a good idea. So that's one piece. We've opened the discussion up to community members. If we open that up, I think it's fair to hear from the 1, 2, 3, 4 other people briefly, 1 minute each. But I think to suddenly now say that we're going to vote on a resolution about the zoning, which we never intended to do, with 4 commissioners is not a great idea.
But can I just ask Commissioner Lynch, I thought that you were with Bruce Sherman in being willing to vote on this, the issue, the process issue. I mean, I have real problems with what we're doing here too. And so if Nash and Gosselin are not going to vote for this, and you're not going to vote for it, bringing Zeldin on the line doesn't make sense. I think that we want to talk about, you know, the substance and this process thing. And you've indicated that you think the process argument is good. But I think if I just heard you correctly, you're saying you don't want to deal with this until we have the whole ball of wax, to the extent we have a ball of wax.
Peter, when we scheduled this meeting, when we talked today, it was decided that we were not going to vote on zoning today. So I am just saying, I agree with you. I don't think we should do that today.
Okay.
I don't think it would be a bad idea to send OP a letter asking if this contested hearing thing is not the right avenue for more ability to have input. to share the views that all sorts of community members have about the site, about the zoning. I don't think that's a bad thing. But suddenly now vote on zoning on Connecticut Avenue is not a good idea. I also think that we can't suddenly cut off community conversation with just 4 people who would like to speak if we've opened that up to the community.
So I understand, Peter. So to write a letter on behalf of the commission, we have to vote tonight. To write a letter tomorrow on behalf of the commission on this contested versus rulemaking thing, we would have to vote. I agree with you that we said earlier, and I opened the meeting by saying we're not taking votes. Commissioner Sherman pushed the issue, and for a while it seemed as if he had at least 3 here and could bring Zeldin on. So do you support voting to send a letter, or do you want to put that off until we understand where we are on the substance as well as the process?
I'm open to hearing what commissioners have to say about it. But I do believe that if we can find an opportunity to weigh in further on this zoning, that's a good idea. But also for right now, I think we should hear from the 4 community members that we said we would hear from.
Let me ask Commissioner Sherman what he wants to do here. Commissioner Sherman?
Yeah. I'm happy. I would like to hear from the community. I think Commissioner Lynch makes a good point. Folks have their hands up. We should let them into the conversation. I know we're pressed for time. And then we see where we are after that. Obviously, community comments have had some impact on Commissioner Nash's views. So the community participation is important. I welcome that. I would just make one very important point. I'm advocating this on behalf of the commission in representing the views of our entire community. It is not meant to represent any one party's views. It's meant to represent the views of the entire community, all of our constituents. And I would say that I represent around 2,100 constituents, and I have their interests very much in mind, and they want to have a voice in what happens in important business before commissions like the Zoning Commission. So I just want to make it very clear that this is not aligning our commission with any one segment exclusively of the community, but these segments are all part of our community. Let's be clear, they're all constituents.
Look, I'm not going to be a dictator here. I don't have the right to be a dictator. I don't have the mandate to be one. Both you and Commissioner Lynch want to hear more from the community. It is 8:11. We have the substance issues to look at. We have an executive session. Look, I'm willing to open the gates and let people comment. Commissioner Nash, please keep time. But I would just say that this is precisely the kind of reason we get into a bind where it's impossible to try to figure out what a resolution would look like if all we do is take residents' comments and we don't talk among ourselves. So you put me in a bind, both of you, but Petit Peter just more recently in saying you want to hear from residents when we still don't know where each of us is. So in any case, I open the gates to this. And Ellen, you've been holding up signs to me that read backwards to me, so it's very difficult to translate. So why don't we start with that? And let me just say, I've tried to go back and forth. There seem to be a great number of notes in the chat about how I'm just letting pro-development people speak. Ellen, you're next, and Cheryl Barnes is after that. And Michelle Wallen will be after that. So I'm trying to keep balance here. Ellen.
So as a matter of fact, the only difference between the ANC's ability to weigh in on this, if it's a contested case versus a rulemaking, is that the ANC would not be able to cross-examine witnesses. The ANC can ask for however much time they feel they need to present their resolution and their case. They are not limited to the 5 minutes for community organizations. And I have checked that while I was waiting with 2 different zoning attorneys and the former vice chair of the Board of Zoning Adjustment.
And can I just understand one thing about that? Well, we have a open-ended amount of time, you're saying, for presenting our case. If we present after April 29th, what we can say is only an addendum to whatever we say on April 29th. Is that correct? That we're limited, we can't just say we want another 45 days.
In your testimony, in your request for more time on the 29th, you could ask for that, for additional time. I'm just saying that because you're the ANC and you're entitled to great weight, if you send a request into the zoning commission that says, we would like more time than 5 minutes, ask, and they will negotiate with you, how much time do you need? And then you will get that amount of time. So it's, the only difference, as I said, is that you don't get to cross-examine each witness. But, you know, short of indulging in your inner Perry Mason, there's not that much value to being able to cross-examine witnesses.
Before I go to Cheryl, Commissioner Nash and then Commissioner Lynch.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that we stop talking about process now. We don't have the votes to send the letter now. We can take it up later if we want to. I would like us to move to substance, and we can cut off community comments on process because we're not doing that. We can listen to the community at a certain point on the substance, but it's already 8:15 and we're just spinning our wheels on process. And I think it's enough already. We're not going to do it tonight. We don't have the votes. So let's move on.
Commissioner Lynch.
We had 2 people with 2 minutes that wanted to speak. I think we should let them speak. Cheryl and Michelle.
Cheryl.
Go for it.
Go for it.
And Libby.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
2 corrections. 17th and U was changed from rulemaking to contested last June 2023 when Ed Hanlon threatened to sue. That's when that was changed, and it was in response to a threat to sue letter, an intent to sue letter. That's correction number 1. Correction number 2, zoning has responded to the Office of Open Government Complaints by Chevy Chase Voice that this case that you're talking about, case number 2325, which can't be separated unless there's a new set down separating the 2 zones, that can either be a contested case or a rulemaking case. They have decided in their great wisdom that it should be a rulemaking case, because that way you can testify all you want to, and they can vote however they want to at the end of the day, and then there is no appeal process or recourse. So just those 2 quick corrections. And lastly, I just get the distinct impression that if community members, oh, I thought it was 3 minutes.
No, we're trying to keep it to 2 because we're trying to go on to other things.
I got you. I just don't think that people who are aligned with the developer, the pro-developer, people should really get the opportunity to make blaming and shaming and slanderous remarks on these public forums without you shutting that down. That's all.
We've got Michelle and Libby. 2 minutes. 2 minutes now.
Who's Libby?
Okay. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I've been watching this thing, and I'm sorry, Peter, but I have to keep saying it. I've been watching this thing for 3 years. The people who feel like I do, Chevy Chase Voice, who do not want to see this development for a variety of reasons, very valid reasons, were shut out. This was a done deal with Randy Speck, with Ward 3 Vision and others. We were never given a voice. You never had even a big meeting, which you kept promising us. But more importantly, what I just heard from Jim Nash and Corinthia's statement, you can have whatever opinion you want to have about the leader of Chevy, about Cheryl and one of her comments. But the fact is, Cheryl is not all of Chevy Chase voice. And the survey that you all did, which you seem to be ignoring, had Bruce numbers 60%. It's over 60% of the ANC. That's over 1,300 people, just like signing our petition, who do not want to see all this development here. And didn't you just pass a resolution agreeing that it wouldn't go above 60 feet based on this survey, or you at least talked about? I mean, the point is the community, not anyone in particular, but a large number of this community does not want this development, and it is not for nefarious reasons. It's because we want to keep the green space, the community, the parks, all that. And a lot of us just don't want, these huge buildings suddenly right in the middle of our community center, which will ruin the whole feel of it.
20 seconds.
So please listen to this community, because you haven't for the last 3 years.
Okay.
Okay, Libby is the last person who had their hand up in that line.
Thank you. I thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, 2 minutes. Thank you.
My thoughts are not organized right now, but I'm just going to say, straight off the bat, first of all, I do not appreciate when people get on and say that they are representative of the community, and that they try to speak on behalf of the majority, because I am not in the majority that person was speaking from. I am also in Bruce Sherman's, I'm one of his constituents. I'm not aligned with the majority of his constituents. I also feel like this community should take a long, hard trip to the Underline the Red Line exhibit and integrate that into their concept of zoning, because that's where we need to keep our minds these days also, as opposed to condemning developers and people who are aligned with developers. If the developers are ethical and are doing the right thing in trying to improve our community, I don't think developers are a bad word. I also have to say that slanderous comments, I actually have read those slanderous comments, and it's disgraceful when people who have been running former association heads think it's okay to write racist comments about members of our community and then treat other people for being slanderous. Let's be real. I am also extremely disappointed to have heard racist comments about people in our community.
Okay, so we've heard from people. Chris, I'm going to try to use my immense powers as the chair and get on to the next subject. Let me say, Bruce, my reading of where we are right now is that we do not have the votes. You do not have the votes to approve a letter that we'll have to wait for. If we get to a resolution on substance, then it'll have to be added then. Does that seem like a reasonable interpretation of where we are?
I suppose so.
Okay, so indeed, I don't know when we're going to do an executive session, but let's see if we can get about 20 minutes of this. And I had tried to lay out where I am on this, where my thinking is, and where I am on terms of the substance of the proposal for the actually 3 types of zones. The one for the upper Connecticut Avenue commercial core of our community, absent the community center library, a separate zone for the community center library, and 3 very small zones for detached houses, basically in parts of parking lots. My own view is that some new development is good, that I understand the fears and myself have the fears about developers running roughshod over the community. I think that the 2 areas where we could strengthen, we have won some changes in these zoning proposals, particularly the one at the community center. I still think the buildings are too high, and I wonder whether we can do something about lot occupancy, which is the flip side of open space. Where are people? I mean, I just for a place to start, building height. Just so the community knows, and you will see these documents as soon as I figure out how to put them somewhere where everybody can get them. My own view about the compromise that's needed is to simply say that we can accept the basic tenets of the zone X, the community center library site, and that what we should do is simply ask the zoning commission to apply those provisions to the entire Upper Connecticut Avenue corridor, including the community center library site. Now, this is my view of a reasonable compromise that moves us towards something that could get a majority. We may discover in the next few minutes that there's not a chance in the world that could get a majority. But I mean, that's the kind of conversation between commissioners that is needed to figure out where we are. So Commissioner Lynch.
Yeah, one thing that I've struggled with, and I think other community members may struggle with as well, is conceptualizing what building height actually is. And it dawned on me, there's a building on Connecticut Avenue. I think it's a bank that seems relatively tall compared to. It's near the post office and the bus depot. It's on your side, Peter G. And I was wondering if anybody knew how tall that building was, so we could use that as a reference point when we talk about 60, 70, 80, and so on and so forth.
I'm just asking this for a technoid answer. Ron Eichner, are you on, and do you know the answer to that question?
Yeah, I think I do. That building is probably 56 feet high if you count the penthouse, which is in the way discussion among us in the ANC has gone. We always count the penthouse also. So that I think that building is probably 40 feet to the edge that fronts on the street, and if you add the penthouse in, it's another 18 feet or so above that, 15 to 18 feet.
Thank you.
Ron, just as a follow-up, I just looked it up on Google Maps. This is the M&T Bank building. Is that the one?
Yeah, I know the one. The one, it's sort of a modernish looking building next to Jetties.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so top to bottom, full length, what did you think that was?
Top to bottom, full length, it's probably 55 to 58 feet. 40 feet with a penthouse.
Sorry, you're saying it's 50? You think it's 50?
I think it's about 55 to 58 feet high.
So I think this is probably a good benchmark. Thank you, Ron, very much. I think that building is probably a pretty good benchmark. If people can imagine it or look it up right now on Google View, if we think about something that is higher than that, or is that something that people could live with? You know, me personally, I think I could live with that height of a building on Connecticut Avenue. I think if you go beyond that, I think that does begin to move against what a lot of our community members have said is something that they don't want. So I think that's something to consider, and maybe a height we could use as a gauge.
Can I just, adding to your comment, Peter?
Sure.
One of the things that has been true of a lot of the discussion back and forth is we're pointed to buildings, that apartment buildings in the higher part of the Connecticut Avenue corridor, and said, well, look, there's a building that's 70 or 80 or 90 feet there. Just remember that bringing those buildings up to the sidewalk, as would be likely in the commercial corridor, means that they're not set back on a parcel of land. So they're going to appear bigger in terms of what it does to light, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, Jim.
Yeah. I am not on board, Peter, with your resolution, and I'm going to explain why. I see three competing values here. One, which hardly anybody talks about, and people love to talk about building height, but we don't talk about the lack of affordable housing. And I know people who are dying on the streets in our city. So making a shorter building means less housing. So that's a trade-off. But the third competing value is open green space. And based on what I have heard from my constituents, and by the way, based on the survey, which I do not regard as definitive because so few people in our ANC took it, but if we're going to go by the survey, a plurality of people in my district want housing, according to that survey. But when I read the verbal comments, they said, we want housing, we do not want to lose any green space. So where I come out on this is if there are three competing values, height, green space, and affordable housing, I prioritize housing and green space, and height is not as important. Therefore, I am okay with what the zoning commission is proposing. I think the devil will be in the details when we actually see an RFP, because how that is configured, as Ron Eichner has tirelessly pointed out, how that is configured is going to matter. And you can make a building more or less obnoxious based on how it is designed. And we will have the power to weigh in on proposals and say, we don't want this, we do want that. I believe some RFPs are going under the zoning height. And so just because the zoning says you can go so high, it doesn't tell you what you're actually going to look at in the end. So anyway, that's why building height is, for me, a red herring. What I care about is green space and affordable housing. So I'm not going to support what you have, Peter.
Other commissioners on the issue of height and lot occupancy, or the flip side of it, which is open space?
Well, just to recall what we have as a commission asked the community about on the survey, that was with regard to the community center and library site, not the rest of the avenue. And our resolution and our reiteration of our resolution with the 60-foot height limit concerned the community center and library site, not the rest of the avenue. The rest of the avenue, over the next dozen years, 15 years, or thereabouts, during the time in which the small area plan is going to be realized, going to be built out, the rest of the avenue on both sides is going to have a substantial amount of housing with 20% IZ plus affordable. So I'm not hearing, we haven't asked the community more broadly. We decided on the survey not to ask about other parts of the avenue. We limited the survey strictly to the community center and library. So this speaks to the difference between those two parcels, if you will, the library and community center site and the rest of the avenue in terms of people's perceptions and their concerns, precisely because there were competing imperatives regarding that community center, the Civic Core site. We have a library, we have a community center, yes, green space, so forth and so on, parking and all of that, which makes it difficult to accomplish everything that the city has wanted to accomplish. And it was reflected in the February letter from last year that Councilmember Fruman sent to DEMPED. So I just want to be clear about what we're talking about here and the height restrictions, Peter, that we're discussing. It was 60 feet that we said would be the maximum amount because of what people in the survey said as regards the community center library site.
That's right. And look, I mean, I just point out two things. One is that The rest of the avenue is private property. What we're trying to do here is find rules that allow private property owners to use their property within limits as they will. My own view is that there is a substantial amount of pressure for some change. And just as an anecdotal piece of evidence, 100 developer reps showed up for the community center library walk around. And at least we hear that the owners of the M&T Bank building and the Blue 44 of Fishery building also have proposals on the drawing boards for development. So what we're trying to do is come up with some rules that put a cap on what I think is not pressure coming from us, is actually not pressure coming from the district. It's pressure coming from property owners. And my concern about the height at the community center library, I'm willing to compromise and go higher than the 60 feet that we said. But that is going to be a trendsetter. I think that's going to be a trendsetter for what happens on the rest of the avenue. And so if that is over high compared even to what future development is elsewhere on the avenue, I think it's going to add to pressure to go even higher elsewhere on the avenue. So my proposal is trying to get some agreement that is a compromise between no change and change none of us want to see, that would fundamentally change the scale and style of the center of our community. Peter, did you have your hand up?
Chair Gore's here. Hey, welcome.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lisa, do you want to speak, including introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Lisa Gore, Chair of ANC 34G. My apologies for running late. I had some other issues I had to take care of, so I jumped on as soon as I was free. I am definitely coming in late to the discussion, so I'm just going to be listening in. I will be looking at the past meeting video, this meeting video, and weighing the resolution very carefully. So I'm in listening mode for tonight, but thank you, Peter Lynch, for the acknowledgement. We'll defer to Commissioner Gosselin.
Okay, do others want to talk? So in addressing Jim's point, I understand you have other priorities than height, but all these things are trade-offs. And when you think about the trade-off vis-a-vis the rest of the avenue, and Bruce Sherman is right that we've done a hell of a lot of talking about the community center library, and we've sort of, the also ran here in the conversation is what happens to the rest of the avenue. And my concern about an 80-foot building, an 80-foot maximum at the community center library, and again, the way I talk, and I think the way ordinary people talk about a building is the height from the ground to the top, the tippy top of the building. My concern about not doing some trimming there, some additional trimming, again, recognizing that the city, the district has made some compromises, some important compromises on open space and on height already. But my concern about not taking another bite out of height is that it sets the trends for the rest of the avenue. And I think 80-foot buildings, so that's just my argument on why you might reconsider your position. Jim, did you raise your, so Peter Lynch, you have your hand up. No,
I got a lot of thoughts. I want to address what Jim said about his concern for the homeless and people that need housing. It's shared by myself. It's shared by so many in the community that have done a lot of work. Libby mentioned the undesigned red line folks that we helped or tried to help get funding for. That is very much in our minds as we think about this. I think something as explanation to the community that has given me deep pause is that I can't open the newspaper on a given day, on a given week, without finding a story. I mean, the one this week is about the affordable housing in Chinatown that the city is not supporting. The folks brought up the U in 16 project that is almost identical to ours. So many of those residents are scared that they're going to get pushed out, and they're the folks that I would imagine we are thinking of trying to help. We don't know what's going to come out of the RFP. A lot of the developers have said, we understand where you are coming from at the ANC in wanting to cater to affordable housing. I've heard murmurs of 100%, which is great news, but who knows what's going to get picked by DMPED and what will come to fruition. But what we do know is that in the RFP, there's extensive language about hotels. There's extensive language about retail that I think none of us had ever conceived of, and go well beyond sort of like a Department of Parks and Recreation run snack bar. And I think all of that ought to give us real pause. And we need to be honest about the fact that I think this city, which, by the way, Jim, we started this ANC commission and asking the city not to boot homeless people out of McPherson Square, and they did the next day with no remorse. These are the same people that we assume are altruistically looking to facilitate affordable housing. It gives me a lot of pause. And I'm not saying totally give up on it, but I do think we need to be very circumspect and ask a lot of questions and try to get as much input as we can going into this process to try to get the best possible result. Interestingly enough, I think the developers that I've talked to, which is about 3 now, are all very interested in hearing from the community and trying to thread that delicate needle. So that's one thought I had. I think, Peter, you brought up a really good point about space on the sidewalk. I mean, that's something that I think our community really appreciates, being able to stroll around Connecticut Avenue, meet other people. I know the Main Street folks sort of emphasize that, and Cleveland Park is doing really well with their boulevard sort of thing that used to be the street parking situation that they used to have. So I think whatever we do in the resolution per zoning on Connecticut Avenue should speak to that. And then, a question for the commissioners is that we did vote for going no further than 60 feet at the community center and library. And if we affirmed that and voted for that earlier, why would we go against that now in the zoning? A lot of things I'm throwing out. One last thing, did we ever understand if height is measured from, Peter G., you always talked about this, did we ever understand if height is measured from Connecticut Avenue to the top of the community center or library, or does it go from the initial brick to the top? Because that makes a difference in height. And I don't know the answer.
Well, I got you an answer on that, Peter. In the wake of your asking that, I wrote to Joel Lawson, and it's from the sidewalk up.
Okay. Okay, so my next follow-up question would be from the sidewalk, and I know maybe this has been somewhere, but I forget, and maybe people on the call don't know. From the sidewalk to the top of the community center currently, what is that height?
Yeah,
do we know?
We went around and around about that. I mean, I don't think we have a clear.
It's about 58 feet, Peter.
It's 38 feet to the top of the building as you're standing on the sidewalk. If you include the mechanical compartment on the top, it gets you around what Ron just said, or a little less than that.
And well, that's actually, I think when Jerry and others were playing around with it on Google Maps, that's actually from the bottom of the building to the top of things. If you go from the curb, it's a little bit more. Can I clarify one other thing on the building measuring height?
We're at almost 8:45, and we were going to do an executive session.
Well, so if I may continue on this point, when I look at the community center and library as it is, if that's, I could envision, if you've got that community center stacked there, having the library, for instance, stacked on top of that, that wouldn't seem outrageous to me. But does that push us past the 60 feet that we asked for? I don't know. But another thing,
can I jump in here on that?
in just a minute, Ron. Another
Okay.
thing that we should be pushing for is we should have very clear answers on these things, and we don't. Ron, we appreciate your input, and you've got a lot of expertise in this, but it shouldn't just be a community member that offers this up helter-skelter at a meeting. OP should have that answer very clearly for us.
They do. It's in the zoning.
Why are we debating it now, though? It doesn't make sense if we don't know.
Because you're not familiar with the
Jerry has a different answer. So there's confusion about it.
Zoning is extremely complicated, Peter, and
this isn't that. Height is not that complicated.
It's one of the most complicated. It's one of the most complicated things in the zoning.
From Connecticut Avenue to the top of a building.
That's not how the building height is measured from the front of a building. What you don't know on the community center is whether you have one building on that site, or 3 buildings, or 4 buildings. Each one would have its own building measuring height.
Ron, there are 2 buildings. How tall are they from Connecticut Avenue or from where the brick is?
Right, but you don't know what's in the proposal. Okay.
Exactly. So we're talking about zoning before a proposal. That also is, to me, doesn't make a ton of sense. I'd like to see the proposals and then maybe match the zoning to that. That seems like it would make more sense, as opposed to throwing a zoning out there, maybe limiting what a good project could be. We don't know, as you said, Ron. So why not get the proposals and then go to the zoning? These are all things I think are reasonable to ask the city, which the city has not been forthright, honest, and a trustworthy broker necessarily with us through all of this. So again, it goes back to that point of they are owed a very healthy dose of skepticism.
Peter, we did get an answer to this. The answer is it's measured from the front of the building, from the sidewalk to the top. And with penthouse and bonuses and so on, the maximum possible height is 80 feet. And I would just
No, I'm sorry. Right now. So we were debating that. You're saying possible with the new zoning.
So let me just
say,
say
now, from Connecticut Avenue to the top of the community center what is that height?
Great to know. But I would just say
when we don't know.
We don't have a real firm answer on that. But I would just point out to you the idea of looking for proposals and then making the rules for the proposals is just
okay. But we don't even have the most bare bones facts.
Right.
We don't even have the most elemental facts of what we're looking at and what we're deciding on. If in an ANC meeting a week before the zoning, we can't even come to a consensus on the height of the thing from Connecticut Avenue to the top of the community center.
Ultimately,
so talking about 60 and 70 and 80 and 70 plus 15 with a setback makes very little sense.
Jim, why don't you speak? And then I think, are we going to do an executive session or not? Commissioners? Well, let Jim speak and then let's see.
I believe so, and I believe Michael Zeldin is on.
Hang on a minute. Did we announce executive session? What is this?
Yeah, we changed the agenda.
Okay. And Peter, make me co-host.
Says you are co-host.
No, or make me host. I can't move Zelda.
I'm on, Lisa.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to move your screen up.
Oh, I'm happy to be at the bottom. I'm happy to be at the bottom.
Okay, I was going to respond to what Commissioner Lynch and Commissioner Gosselin said. First, to Commissioner Lynch, I agree that we should be skeptical about the city's commitment to actually building affordable housing. I've been an advocate in this area for a long time, and they don't always do what they say they're going to do. That, to me, though, is a separate issue from height. Secondly, you said we voted for 60 feet. I did not vote for the 60 feet. And there were other commissioners, the commission did, but I did not. And there were commissioners who were not here who I think would have voted against it, but they weren't present to vote against it. And third, to you, Peter, you were talking about the precedent of the taller buildings on the Civic Core for the rest of Connecticut Avenue, but they are that zone has a lower building height right now, does it not? It's 10 feet lower. So, and it's a separate zone. So I don't understand your point about a precedent from one zone to another.
But my point is just trying to understand what we're dealing with. And as
No. I'm sorry, Peter Lynch. That was a question to Commissioner Gosselin, who he was worried the precedent of the Civic Core high buildings would be a problem for the rest of Upper Connecticut. I'm confused because those are two separate zones, and the rest of Connecticut is 10 feet lower.
They are two separate zones now. My proposal is to have a single zoning for all of Connecticut Avenue, including the community center and library. So what it would do, it would just, look, I'm trying to find a change that is simple to ask the zoning commission for. It responds to community concerns about height. And my concern is that 80 feet, particularly if the site isn't, cut back down the pedestal of land it sits on, that building could loom over the rest of the avenue. And so I'm proposing that it be all one zone. And by rules of the proposed zone for the rest of Connecticut Avenue. Now, let me say it's 8:50. I think that if we're going to have this discussion, and what we're going to be discussing generally is how we manage through the next period, getting letters out, resolutions sent, stuff posted on the website. I want to thank everybody who's come. I'm going to turn off the camera.
Hang on a minute. We still have a hand raised, Ron Eichner.
Well, we just can't clear the deck. All right, Ron, say your piece quickly.
Very quickly. The first thing I was going to say is what Jim just said, is that you did say, Peter, that you were worried about 80 feet setting a precedent for other blocks, but that's not going to happen because the zoning that's being proposed makes a distinction between the other blocks and this one, and no PUDs or anything like that are allowed in the neighborhood zone. So the height on the other blocks cannot be raised. The other thing, to Peter Lynch, just to give you some sense of what's out there, you're talking about, for the rest of Connecticut Avenue, one additional floor to what's allowed now, and a couple of floors on the community center site. So, saying 70, 80 feet and conjuring up high rises is counterproductive. You really
Ron, I wasn't conjuring up high rises. I was asking for exact feet on the height that we were.
Okay, we gave it to you.
Saying a couple of floors also doesn't get
we need exact numbers here.
Yeah. And the other thing, just to expound a little bit on what Peter said, and I think Jim said it too, there is a connection between height and open space. And the city has a commitment to affordable housing, and in order to get the amount of affordable housing you need and deliver significant open space, there might be
you clearly have an axe to grind. It's
point of
unfair to
order.
let you go
You're
on.
gonna have to
Point
mute.
of order.
You're gonna have
Point
to
of order.
mute your
Point of order for everybody, because we already said that we were going to hear from that 4 with 1 minute. Ron answered a technical question. Thank you for that, Ron. But
I'm off.
We had gone just to commissioners. So let's stick with commissioners right now, just as we had committed to earlier in the night.
And so I think that we should end the recording. I think that we ask the public, the residents, to leave, please. And we're going to have a discussion about how we manage the next few months.